guest is a legendary stand-up comedian and an Academy Award-winning actor. Hold on to your seats and welcome the one, the only, the hilarious Robin Williams.
And Thanksgiving. I had a traditional Thanksgiving in Atlantic City. What a wonderful place to go.
Robin Williams made the world laugh with a brilliance that seemed unshakable. From the Genie's boundless energy,
let's make some magic! Let's blow this popsicle stand!
To the tender wisdom of Dead Poets Society.
No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
His gift was limitless. But behind the curtain of comedy lived a man fighting a battle few ever saw. And now, with the opening of his private diary, one final entry from his last night has surfaced. A truth so devastating, it reframes everything we thought we knew about his final hours. The world adored his laughter, but his own words reveal the haunting silence he carried within. The two sides of Robin Williams. On stage, Robin Williams was unstoppable. His comedy defied structure, a torrent of impressions, characters, and improvisations that seemed to pour out of him faster than the human brain should allow.
I also want to thank the Hollywood Foreign Press for acknowledging comedy.
To fans, he was a whirlwind of laughter, a performer who could light up a room simply by walking into it. His roles became cultural landmarks: the rebellious radio DJ in Good Morning, Vietnam, the tender teacher urging students to seize the day in Dead Poets Society, the eccentric nanny in Mrs. Doubtfire who taught us that love could transcend divorce. Each character felt larger than life, each performance another reminder of his unmatched brilliance. But off stage, away from the lights and the cameras, a different Robin emerged. Friends often described him as deeply sensitive, almost fragile.
What was it like? What was your experience working with Robin?
Oh, it was mighty. I mean, I was such a fan of this man's work.
He was the man who stayed behind after comedy sets to listen to struggling comics, the one who slipped into hospitals unannounced to cheer up children fighting illness. He gave his time freely, his heart generously. Yet those who knew him best also saw the shadows. The quiet moments when his laughter would fade and his eyes carried a heaviness no joke could mask.
It was a really hard thing. He's my dearest friend, and it was only 2 weeks after.
Billy Crystal once remarked that Robin was the funniest man in the room, but sometimes the saddest when the lights went down. It was a sentiment echoed by many. The very energy that fueled his comedy often seemed to drain him when he was alone. Humor was not just a gift, it was also a shield. Behind the rapid-fire wit and dazzling improvisation lay a man wrestling with loneliness, self-doubt, and the weight of his own thoughts. This duality defined Robin's life. To the public, he was the boundless comic spirit who could transform pain into punchlines. Privately, he was a man searching for peace, often writing, reflecting, and confiding in the pages of his personal diary. Those pages, untouched by the demands of performance, became the one place where he didn't need to be on. They reveal not just his brilliance, but his vulnerability, the truths he carried when laughter wasn't enough to keep the darkness away. And that's the paradox of Robin Williams, a man who could bring joy to millions while silently battling despair within himself. His diary doesn't erase the laughter he gave us, but it shows us what it cost him. And as we turn to those private pages, we begin to see just how heavy that hidden struggle truly was. And his private diary proves just how much of that struggle he carried in silence. Why Robin kept a diary.
Is slightly demented, but nevertheless, would you welcome Robin Williams?
For most of his career, Robin Williams carried notebooks. At first glance, they were filled with nonsense, quick jokes scribbled in the margins, doodles of cartoonish faces, half-formed ideas for characters that might one day come alive on stage. Comedy was his oxygen, and these notebooks were where he captured it before it slipped away. But as the pages turned, the notebooks revealed something else. To Robin, they weren't just sketch pads. They were sanctuaries, a place where the noise of fame fell away, where the demand to always be funny could be silenced. In his diary, he didn't have to perform. He could just be Robin, and within those pages, his voice softened. Sometimes he wrote in jokes, but just as often he confessed truths too heavy to say out loud. When the laughter stops, the room feels too big. One entry reads, "Like the echo is mocking me. Everyone thinks I'm surrounded, but sometimes I've never felt more alone." Another page carries the scroll of a restless night. "I can't sleep. Too many voices. Not the funny kind. The kind that whispers doubt. The kind that reminds me how easy it is to make others laugh, and how hard it is to make myself feel okay." His diary was not only an outlet for creativity, it became a mirror, one that reflected a side of himself that no audience ever saw. Friends say he was generous with his time, always lifting others, always masking his own pain with humor. But here, in his private writing, he allowed the mask to slip.
If you're that depressed, reach out to someone. And remember, suicide is a permanent solution to temporary problems.
Was this his way of reaching for help without having to ask? Or was it simply the instinct of a man who had always used words, whether in punchlines or confessions, to process a world that often felt overwhelming? As the years went on, the tone of his diary shifted. Earlier pages were alive with energy, buzzing with new characters and comedic riffs. But in later entries, the words slowed, weighed down by something darker: loneliness, doubt, a creeping sense of change inside himself. "These pages feel safer than I do," he once scribbled. "Here I can be afraid. Here I don't have to pretend." The diary, once a sketchbook for laughter, had become his most intimate witness. And within those pages, his reflections began to take a darker turn. In his final years, the decline no one saw coming.
People want you to be a certain way, and sometimes you can't help but be depressed, or, just the nature of being.
By 2014, Robin Williams' world was changing in ways even he couldn't fully understand. To the outside eye, he was still the quick-witted genius, smiling with fans, planning new projects. But behind closed doors, something inside him was slipping. His memory faltered. He grew disoriented, unable to follow conversations that once would have sparked his brilliance. Confusion and paranoia crept in, leaving him shaken. Doctors diagnosed him with the early stages of Parkinson's disease. It was an answer, but not the right one. The true culprit, revealed only after his death, was Lewy body dementia, a cruel disorder that attacks the brain with confusion, hallucinations, and the unbearable awareness of one's own decline.
I don't have very much time these days, so I'll make it quick, like my life.
His diary became the place where he tried to make sense of the unraveling. "I walk into a room and forget why I'm there. Not just once, again and again. The mind that once held 1,000 voices can't even hold one thought steady. I feel trapped inside my own head." The handwriting grew uneven, the sentences shorter, fractured. One page reads, "What if I disappear while I'm still here? What if Robin fades, but the shell stays? I see the storm building, and I don't know how to stop it." Colleagues noticed subtle changes. One crew member from his final TV role recalled he'd ask for his lines more often. That wasn't Robin. Robin never needed help remembering. His mind was always racing ahead. Seeing him hesitate was unsettling. Even at home, the diary shows his anguish. "They think it's just age or stress," but I can feel something taking me apart piece by piece. And I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending. Neurologists who studied his case after his passing described Lewy body dementia as one of the most misdiagnosed conditions in medicine. A disease that erodes memory, warps perception, and leaves patients terrified by their own awareness. It wasn't depression that killed him, one specialist noted. It was a disease that hijacked his brain. Yet in public, Robin still reached for humor. He smiled for photos, cracked jokes at dinner, played the role he had perfected for decades. But his diary, the one place he didn't have to act, reveals the torment. It was a decline no one could see coming. The world thought of Robin Williams as unstoppable, the man who turned chaos into joy. But in his final months, his diary reveals a man grappling with the theft of the very thing that made him who he was, his mind. But those words were just the beginning of the devastating truth he would record on his final night. The private struggles revealed in his writing. As his illness advanced, Robin's diary shifted from scattered jokes and fragments of creativity to raw confessions that revealed just how deeply he feared what was happening to him. More than the memory lapses or confusion, it was the sense of losing himself that haunted him. On one page, the handwriting trembles. Who am I without my mind? Without the quickness, the sparks, the play. If the voices go quiet, will there be anything left of me? For a man who had lived through characters, dozens, sometimes hundreds in a single performance, the thought of silence was unbearable. Comedy was not just what he did, it was who he was. Without it, Robin feared he would disappear. Another entry reflects the weight of disappointing those closest to him. The hardest part is not the forgetting. It's looking into their eyes and knowing I'm slipping. I feel like a burden. I don't want to be one. Not to her, not to them, not to anyone. Friends recalled that he often masked these feelings in public. One longtime colleague put it simply, Robin would laugh things off. Even when you could tell something was wrong, he'd crack a joke, change the subject, make you laugh instead. That was his way of keeping the pain out of sight. But the diary betrayed that disguise. Page after page carried not humor, but heaviness. Scribbled lines about exhaustion, fragments about fear. I used to feel joy in every crowd. Now, the laughter feels far away, like I'm on the outside looking in. The diary had become his only outlet, where no performance was required, no smile demanded. And within those private words, the despair sharpened. They show us a man caught between gratitude for the love around him and a creeping hopelessness he could not shake. A close friend later said, "If you only knew him on stage, you'd think he was untouchable." But Robin's heart was wide open. And that meant he felt the pain of the world, and his own, more deeply than most. And then, in his last months, that pain began to crystallize in words too heavy to ignore. The diary stopped being a sketchbook of possibility. It had become a record of struggle, one written in silence, away from the laughter he gave so freely. And then, in his last hours, Robin wrote something so raw, it silenced even those closest to him. The day before his death. On the day before his death, Sunday, August 10th, 2014, Robin Williams, at age 63, seemed gentle, even tender. Those closest to him remember a quietness that lingered, as if he was conserving energy or carrying a thought he didn't want to share. He spent time with his wife, Susan, smiling softly, moving carefully. There was no dramatic outburst, no sign that tragedy loomed so near. To the outside eye, it looked like an ordinary day. But his diary tells another story. The entry begins with gratitude. Thank you for this life, for her love, for the laughter of my children, for every moment I was able to give something back. I am grateful. The words are deliberate, slower than his usual hurried scribbles. But between the lines, a darker undertone rises. The storm is louder tonight, harder to quiet the noise. They think I'm resting, but I'm not. I'm pacing the inside of my head. It is a chilling glimpse into his state of mind. While his gestures were tender, his writing suggests that inside he was already drifting into a place of unbearable solitude. Susan later recalled, he seemed calm, not happy, but gentle. We went to bed and I thought, tomorrow is another day. I didn't know tomorrow would be the day everything changed.
And then she sent me a text. Said he's not up yet. What should I do?
In the diary, Robin reflected on love with the kind of finality that now feels prophetic. Love is the one gift I was certain of. Even when I couldn't see myself clearly, I could feel it. That is what held me. But then the page turns, and the handwriting grows shaky. The words shorter, sharper. But love can't stop the maze. I can't find the exit. I don't know how much longer I can fight the fog. It was as if he was straddling two worlds. One filled with gratitude for the life he had lived, and another consumed by the torment of what was happening inside his mind. The duality that had always defined Robin, joy and despair, comedy and sorrow, had reached its most devastating point.
What did she say? I can't even, I'm sorry. That 20-minute car ride.
On that final evening, he offered warmth in person, but on paper, he left hints of the storm raging within. And when the final night came, the words he left behind were devastating. The final entry emerges. The final entry sits near the back of his diary, its page almost bare compared to the busy scribbles of earlier years. The handwriting is noticeably different, unsteady, uneven, the letters trailing off as though each one took immense effort to write. It is shorter than usual. The words themselves are sparse, but in their sparseness lies the weight of an ending. The entry begins with light, almost luminous gratitude. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for holding me when I could not hold myself. I am grateful. Always. For a moment, the words echoed the same warmth seen in his entry from the day before. They carry the grace of a man who never stopped appreciating the people around him. But then, the tone shifts, suddenly, abruptly, as though the pen itself had grown heavier in his hand. I am lost in a maze. The letters stagger, slanting toward the bottom of the page. He continues. The walls are closing in. I keep searching for the door, but it fades. I feel myself fading too. Psychologists who later studied his case have said this imagery is common in patients with Lewy body dementia, the sense of being trapped, confused, aware of their decline but powerless to stop it. For Robin, it seemed to crystallize into one haunting metaphor, the maze without an exit. And then, a line that feels both chilling and final. The pain is louder now. Louder than laughter. Louder than love. It is not a long entry. Barely half a page. The lines grow shorter. His pen strokes weaker, as though the act of writing itself was slipping away. His wife would later say, I think he was saying goodbye in the only way he knew how. He couldn't speak it, so he wrote it. Others, reading the final words, wonder if it was not so much a farewell as it was a document of his confusion, the disease pulling at his thoughts, scattering them even as he tried to capture them. Whatever the interpretation, The final entry has an undeniable weight. Robin's diary had always been a place of creativity, confession, and reflection. But here, in his last words, the mask is gone, the shield is lowered. It is the voice of a man at the edge of his own unraveling, still trying to write his way through the storm. And yet, within that final entry, there was one line that revealed the full depth of his despair, a line that continues to haunt us to this day. The last words that haunt us. When Robin Williams's final diary entry was first examined, one line stood out more than any other. Amid the shaky handwriting and fragmented thoughts, he wrote, "I can't see the light anymore." It was a chilling admission, both simple and devastating. Unlike earlier reflections filled with metaphors and searching, this sentence was stark, direct, final. Psychologists who later studied his case pointed to this line as emblematic of Lewy body dementia's cruel progression.
Today's question asks if I can analyze the mental health and personality factors that may be at work in the Robin Williams death.
One neurologist explained, patients often describe a kind of perceptual dimming, not literal blindness, but the loss of clarity, of orientation. For Robin, the light may have symbolized hope, identity, or even reality itself. Another expert noted that the abruptness of the sentence suggested something deeper. It's not the language of depression as we typically define it. It's the language of cognitive breakdown. He was documenting his awareness of slipping away. Even the unfinished nature of the entry added weight. The final sentence trailed off mid-thought, as though his pen could not keep up with his unraveling mind. For forensic analysts, this became one of the most haunting aspects of his last words. It was as if he reached for a conclusion and could not find it. That incompleteness reflects both the disease and his despair. Friends who later learned of the diary struggled with what it revealed. One colleague admitted, to see it written that he couldn't see the light was heartbreaking. He gave light to all of us, and in the end, he felt he had none left for himself. Medical experts caution, however, against reading the entry as a traditional suicide note. For Robin, the words carry a dual resonance. On one level, they represent the personal despair of a man exhausted by his condition. On another, they illustrate the devastating clarity of a disease that robs patients of their very sense of self. The diary, once filled with humor and imagination, ended with a stark line that continues to echo in the hearts of those who loved him and admired him. And when paired with what we now know medically, the full weight of Robin's last words becomes even more devastating. The devastating truth of his final entry.
A statement from his wife confirming his death alludes to his battle with depression, and now we know why.
The final words Robin Williams left behind were not about comedy, fame, or the legacy he built on stage and screen. They weren't about the roles that made him beloved, or the laughter he so effortlessly gifted to the world. His diary did not end with a joke or a flourish. Instead, it ended with silence. The silence of a man confronting the collapse of the very thing that defined him. Forensic experts who examined his case are clear. Robin was not simply battling depression, nor was his passing the result of a conscious surrender. He was fighting a neurological enemy few understood. Lewy body dementia, the disease revealed only in his autopsy, had stolen his clarity, warped his perception, and left him painfully aware of his own unraveling. This was not a matter of will, one neurologist explained. This was a matter of biology. His brain was under siege. And yet, the diary captured more than symptoms. It recorded the private anguish of a man who knew what was slipping away. His mind, his spark, his identity. His final entry reflected not weakness, but the torment of being trapped in a body and brain that no longer obeyed him. For those who loved him, this truth reframed the tragedy. His last words weren't simply despair. They were evidence of a battle he couldn't win, no matter how fiercely he fought. The diary revealed that his deepest fear wasn't death itself, but the slow erasure of who he was. This is the devastating truth of Robin Williams's final entry. He did not lose to sadness or to some private flaw. He lost to a disease that dismantled him from within, piece by piece, until even light felt out of reach. And yet, even in those final pages, there remains a quiet echo of gratitude. Amidst the fear, he thanked the people who loved him. He acknowledged the bonds that anchored him, even as the storm grew louder. That duality, joy and despair, love and fear, had always defined him. It was present in his comedy, in his life, and finally, in his last words. Robin Williams gave the world laughter, but his diary shows the cost of his silent battle. He was not just a comedian, not just a performer. He was a man fighting to hold on to himself until the very end. And in those final words, we see not a choice, but the devastation of a disease that stole his light. Robin Williams gave the world a gift few could match: laughter that healed, performances that inspired, and a spirit that seemed unstoppable. But his diary tells us what the stage could not: the cost of carrying that light while battling a darkness no one could see. His final words do not diminish his legacy. They deepen it, reminding us that behind the brilliance was a man fighting to hold on to himself until the very end. The world lost a comedian, but his private words remind us he was also a husband, a father, and a soul confronting the unimaginable. The question lingers: did Robin want his diary to be found as a final message to the world, or were those words meant only for himself? What do you believe? Share your thoughts below.